Elsa the Inequality Queen, back talking to you about absolute value equations. Now here's a question. Why did Mickey Mouse get hit with a snowball? Because Donald ducked.
The first vocabulary term is absolute value. That's how far a number is from zero on the number line. It's also called its magnitude. Down here, you can see 3 examples of absolute value. Here we have the absolute value of 5. And the absolute value of 5 is 5. That's because 5 is 5 units away from 0 on the number line. Here, the absolute value of 0 is 0. That's because 0 is 0 units away from 0 on the number line. And the absolute value of negative 3 is going to be 3 because negative 3 is 3 units away from 0 on the number line. You can think about it this way. Whatever rational number, positive or negative, is inside the absolute value, these absolute value markers are going to turn it positive. Now, solving absolute value equations. When solving absolute value equations, our goals are to simplify, move, break, then solve. There's an extra step in here now. So first, we're going to simplify each side if possible. We're going to move the absolute value to the left side of the equation. Then we're going to move everything else to the right. Once you have the absolute value by itself, you're going to break it into 2 equations equal to opposite expressions. The expression in the absolute value always stays the same. Remember that. And lastly, we're going to solve each equation and check both solutions. So again, simplify, move, break, solve. Simplify each side if possible. Move your absolute value to the left. Move everything else to the right. Break your absolute value into 2 equations equal to opposite expressions, and then solve.
What did the 101 Dalmatians say after eating dinner? That hit the spot.
Okay, example 1 says solve and graph each equation. So here we have the absolute value of x is equal to 8. So we simplify, move, break, solve. First, can we simplify either side? No. Next, move our absolute value to the left side of the equation. Done. Next, we move everything else to the right side. Done. Next, we break our absolute value equation into 2 separate equations equal to opposite expressions. So whatever's inside the absolute value is going to stay the same. So we're going to have x is equal to, x is equal to. And they're going to be equal to opposite expressions. So it's going to be x is equal to 8, x is equal to negative 8. Sweet. Now we have our 2 possible answers, so we need to check our solution. So we're going to take each of these possible answers, plug them back in for x in our original absolute value equation, and see if it checks out. So I'm going to take 8, plug it in for x. Now what's the absolute value of 8? That's going to be 8. Does 8 equal 8? Yes, that checks out. So this answer is good. Now let's check this answer. Does x equal negative 8? Well, let's plug in negative 8 for x in our original absolute value equation. What's the absolute value of negative 8? That's going to be positive 8. Does 8 equal 8? Yes, that checks out. So both of these answers are good. Our answers to this absolute value equation are x is equal to negative 8 and positive 8. To graph this, it's really easy. Just go to negative 8 on your number line, put a point, go to positive 8, put a point, and you're done.
Why did Mickey Mouse cross the road? Because he was on a mini vacation. You try.
Okay, simplify, move, break, solve. So first, can I simplify either side? No. Next, move my absolute value to the left side of the equation. So let's go ahead and just flip this equation. We're going to take absolute value of p, put it over here, take 1, put it over here. Now our absolute value is on the left side of the equation, so we're going to move everything else to the left. There's nothing else to move. Sweet. So we go to the break step. We're going to break this into 2 separate equations, and they're going to be equal to opposite expressions. So whatever's inside the absolute value stays the same. So it's going to be p equals, and they're going to be equal to opposite expressions. So p equals 1, p equals negative 1, and you're done. Now let's go ahead and check both of your answers. So we're going to take 1, plug it back into the original absolute value to see if that checks out. What's the absolute value of 1? That's 1. That one is good. Let's check this one now. We're going to take negative 1, plug it back in for p in the original absolute value equation. Does that check out? What's the absolute value of negative 1? That's 1. 1 equals 1. So that checks out. Both of those are your answers. So your answers are p equals negative 1 and positive 1. And when you're graphing that, really easy. You just go to negative 1 on your number line, put a point, go to positive 1 on your number line, put a point. Example 2, doing the same thing. Solve and graph each equation. So we have absolute value of 2t plus 1 is equal to 7. Again, simplify, move, break, solve. So first, can I simplify either side? No, I can't simplify what's in here because this has a t and this doesn't. Next, move my absolute value to the left. Done. Next, we're going to move everything else to the right. There's nothing else outside the absolute value, so you're good. Next, we break. So we're going to break this into 2 separate equations. Whatever's inside the absolute value stays the same. So it's going to be 2t plus 1 equals 2t plus 1 equals. They're going to be equal to opposite expressions. So whatever's on this side of the equal sign, we're going to make opposite. So we have 2t plus 1 equals 7, 2t plus 1 equals negative 7. So now I have two separate equations, and those are from my original absolute value equation. So I can solve each of these now. So we go here. To solve this, remember, simplify, move, solve. So I am going to subtract 1 from both sides first. That way these cancel out. Now I have 2t is equal to 6. Now to get t all by itself, I'm going to divide both sides by 2. That way these cancel out, and I'm left with t is equal to 3. On this side, get rid of this plus 1 first. I do the opposite, the inverse. I subtract 1 from both sides. These cancel each other out, and over here, negative 7 minus 1 is the same as negative 7 plus negative 1, so it's going to be negative 8. Now to get t all by itself, I get this 2 to the other side by dividing both sides by 2. That way these cancel out, and I get t is equal to negative 4. So my two possible answers are t equals 3 and t equals negative 4. I now need to check both of those answers, so I'm going to go back to my original absolute value equation and plug in 3 for t and see if it checks out. What's 2 times 3? That's 6. What's 6 plus 1? That's 7. What's the absolute value of 7? It's 7. So does 7 equal 7? Yes, this is an answer. Now let's go to this guy right here. T equals negative 4. I'm going to go back to my original absolute value equation, plug in negative 4 for t. What's 2 times negative 4? That's negative 8. And what's negative 8 plus 1? That's going to be negative 7. Now what's the absolute value of negative 7? That's going to be positive 7. Does 7 equal 7? Yes, it does. So both of these are my answers to this absolute value equation. And when I graph this, all I have to do is go to negative 4 on my number line, put a point, go to 3 on my number line, put a point.
Elsa, frozen. You try.
Okay, again, simplify, move, break, solve. So first, can I simplify either side? No, this has an R, this doesn't. Next, move my absolute value to the left side of the equation. Done. Next, move everything else to the right. There's nothing else outside the absolute value, so you're good. Next, I need to break this into two separate equations. Whatever's inside the absolute value is going to stay the same. So it's going to be negative 3r plus 6 is equal to negative 3r plus 6 is equal to. What's going to change is what's on the other side. So it's going to be 12 and negative 12. So we have negative 3r plus 6 is equal to 12, and negative 3r plus 6 is equal to negative 12. So what's inside the absolute value stays the same. The only thing that changes is what's on the other side. So I've broken it into two equations. Now I just need to solve for r in each of these. So to solve, remember, simplify, move, solve. That's how you solve a regular equation. First, I need to get rid of this plus 6, so I do the opposite, the inverse. I subtract 6 from both sides. That way these cancel out, and 12 minus 6 is going to give me 6. Now to get r all by itself, I move this negative 3 to the right side by dividing both sides by negative 3. That way these cancel each other out. I get r is equal to negative 2. On this side, again, get rid of this plus 6 by subtracting 6 on both sides. These are going to cancel out, and over here, negative 12 minus 6 is the same as negative 12 plus negative 6, so it's going to be negative 18. Now to get r all by itself, I get this negative 3 to the right by dividing both sides by negative 3. That way these cancel out, and negative 18 divided by negative 3 is going to give me positive 6. So now I have my two possible answers. I check both of those answers by plugging them back into the original absolute value equation. Let's plug in negative 2 first. If I plug in negative 2, what's negative 2 times negative 3? That's going to give me positive 6. Now 6 plus 6 is going to give me 12. What's the absolute value of 12? That's 12. So 12 equals 12. We did it right. On this side, I'm going to plug in 6 now to make sure I did that right. When I plug in 6 times negative 3 is going to be negative 18. Negative 18 plus 6 is going to give me negative 12. And what's the absolute value of negative 12? That's positive 12. Boom, did that right. So both of these are going to be my answers for this absolute value equation. Now when I plot them, again, really easy. Go to negative 2 on the number line, put a point. Go to 6 on the number line, put a point. And you're done. Example 3, doing the same thing. We simplify, move, break, solve anytime you see an absolute value equation. What we do first, simplify. Can we simplify either side? No, not yet. Next, we need to move my absolute value to the left. Already there. Next, move everything else to the right. This 2 on the outside of our absolute value has to go. Since it's 2 times my absolute value, I can get it to the right side by dividing by 2 on both sides. That way, these are going to cancel each other out. And over here, 10 divided by 2 is going to give you 5. Now I have the absolute value of h minus 5 is equal to 5, and I can move to my break step. So I'm going to break this into two separate equations. What's inside the absolute value stays the same. So I'm going to have h minus 5 equals and h minus 5 equals. The only difference is what's going to be on the other side. So here it's going to be h minus 5 equals 5, and on this side it's going to be h minus 5 equals negative 5. Now that I have both of these, I can solve them separately and get my two answers. So on this side, to solve this equation for h, I simplify, move, solve. Again, all I have to do is get my constants to the right. So I'm going to add 5 to both sides to cancel out this minus 5. Over here, 5 plus 5 gives you 10. So we have h equals 10 as one of our possible answers. And over here, h minus 5 is equal to negative 5. Again, add 5 to both sides. That way these cancel out, and you get h by itself on this side. On this side, negative 5 plus 5 is going to give you 0. So I get h is equal to 0. Next, what I can do is check both of those possible answers. So I'm going to go to my original absolute value equation and plug in what I got for my answer. So h equals 10. Let's go ahead and plug in 10. What's 10 minus 5? That's going to be 5. And the absolute value of 5 is 5. 5 times 2 then gives you 10, and 10 equals 10. Therefore, that is one of your answers. Sweet. Now let's check this one. We're going to plug in 0 to our original equation for h. What's 0 minus 5? That's negative 5. What's the absolute value of negative 5? That is positive 5. And then 5 times 2 gives you 10. Does 10 equal 10? Yes, it does. Therefore, those answers check out. Now you can plot those on your num line really easily. At 0, put a point, and at 10, put a point. You're done.
Thought that would work better. You try.
Okay, here we go. Simplify, move, break, solve. So first, can we simplify either side? No, not yet. Next, we need to move our absolute value to the left. Done. Next, move everything else to the right. So what's on the outside of the absolute value sign? This negative 4. So how do I move that over here? Since it's negative 4 times my absolute value, I'm going to do the opposite, the inverse. I divide both sides by negative 4. That way these cancel out, and over here, negative 15 divided by negative 4 is going to give me positive 3.75. Now what I do, since I have the absolute value all by itself, I can break it into two separate equations. What's inside the absolute value is going to stay the same for both of the equations. The only thing that's going to change is over here. So I have 2m is equal to 3.75 and 2m is equal to negative 3.75. Next, all I have to do to solve this is divide both sides by 2. So if I were to divide both sides by 2 here, these are going to cancel each other out, and I get m is equal to 1.875. On this side, same thing. Divide both sides by 2 to cancel out this 2, and I get m is equal to negative 1.875. Here are my two possible answers. Next, what I can do is check both of those possible answers. So I'm going to go to my original absolute value equation and plug in what I got for my answers. So let's plug in 1.875 for m. 1.875 times 2 is going to give you 3.75. What's the absolute value of 3.75? That's 3.75. We take that and multiply it by negative 4, and you end up getting negative 15. Does negative 15 equal negative 15? Yes, it does. Therefore, this is one of our answers. Over here, same thing. Plug in negative 1.875 this time. Negative 1.875 times 2 gives you negative 3.75. What's the absolute value of negative 3.75? That's positive 3.75. We then take that and multiply it by negative 4 and get negative 15. Does negative 15 equal negative 15? Yes, it does. Therefore, both of those are your answers, and we can plot them on the number line. These ones are a little tougher because they're not exactly integers. So what we do is we estimate where they are. Negative 1.875. That would be closer to negative 2 than to negative 1. So we put a point right here. And then 1.875 is going to be closer to 2 than it is to 1. So we put a point there. Now we got a special case when we're dealing with absolute value equations. So first, let's treat this just like we normally do. Simplify, move, break, solve. So first, can we simplify either side? No. Next, move our absolute value to the left. Done. Next, move everything else to the right. So this guy got to go. So I'm going to take this plus 5 and subtract it from both sides. That way these cancel out, and I get the absolute value all by itself over here. Negative 2 minus 5 is going to give you negative 7. Next, I need to break this into two separate equations. And inside the absolute value, that's going to stay the same. What's on the other side is going to change. So it's going to be a is equal to negative 7, a is equal to positive 7. Next, what I can do is check both of those possible answers. So I'm going to go to my original absolute value equation and plug in what I got for my answers. So let's take negative 7, plug it in for a. What's the absolute value of negative 7? That's positive 7. And what's 7 plus 5? That's 12. Does that equal negative 2? No, it does not. Therefore, this is not one of your answers. Let's try this guy. So here, I'm going to plug in 7 for a. What's the absolute value of 7? That's 7. And what's 7 plus 5? That is 12. Does 12 equal negative 2? No, it does not. Therefore, that's not one of your answers. Since neither of your possible answers work, you're going to write no solution, and you're done. You could have seen this coming though. If you look here, we have absolute value of a is equal to negative 7. Whatever's inside the absolute value is going to be turned positive. Therefore, there's no number in here that would make this equal to positive 7. So we could say right off the bat, once you see this, absolute value by itself is equal to a negative number, that there's no solution.
Hans is the worst. Christoph's the best. You try.
Okay, again, simplify, move, break, solve. So first, can we simplify either side? No. Next, we need to move our absolute value to the left. Done. Next, everything else got to go. So this -3 on the outside of the absolute value sign has to go. Since -3 times our absolute value, we're going to do the opposite, the inverse. We divide both sides by -3. That way these cancel out. What's 12 divided by -3? That's -4. Now again, you should right here see, oh, we have absolute value by itself equal to a negative number. That can't work, so you write no solution. But if you didn't see that, you can still move on. We're going to break it into two separate equations. What's inside the absolute value is going to stay the same. It's going to be n plus 2 equals and n plus 2 equals. On the other side, though, it's going to be opposite expressions. So it's n plus 2 equals -4 and n plus 2 equals +4. Now we solve both of these. Here, I subtract 2 from both sides, and I get n is equal to -6. Over here, I subtract 2 from both sides, I get n is equal to 2. Now we have two of our possible answers, so we're going to check those. We plug them back into the original absolute value equation for n, so I'm going to take -6, plug it in for n. What's -6 plus 2? That's going to be -4. And what's the absolute value of -4? That's +4. And what's 4 times -3? It's going to give you -12. So these are not the same. Therefore, this is not one of your possible answers. Same thing over here. We're going to plug this into the original equation for n. So we plug in 2. What's 2 plus 2? That's 4. What's the absolute value of 4? That's 4. And what's 4 times -3? That's -12. Because this is -12, this is +12, they are not equal. Therefore, this is not one of your answers, and you can say there is no solution to this absolute value equation. Again, you could have seen this coming. Like we said, absolute value by itself equal to a negative number can't happen. Now a word problem says starting 100 feet away, your friend skates towards you and then passes you by. She skates at a constant speed of 20 feet per second. Her distance d from you in feet after t seconds is given by d equals the absolute value of 100 minus 20t. At what times is she 40 feet from you? So in a word problem, step 1, we're not scared. Step 2, what is it asking? It's asking at what times is she 40 feet from you? So step 3, when we define our variable, we're looking for the times she's 40 feet from you. So t is equal to time in seconds, because right here it says t seconds. Next, what we're going to do, since we have our variable, we're going to write our equation. Oh, look at the question. It's got an equation for us that we're going to use. Sweet. So we have d is equal to the absolute value of 100 minus 20t. Now, what's d? Well, it looks like d is her distance from you in feet. So we have another variable to define. Well, is there any way we could substitute in for that in the problem? Well, it says at what times is she 40 feet from you? So 40 feet is going to be the distance she is from you, and we're trying to figure out the times where that occurs. So we're going to plug in 40 for d here, and now we have our absolute value equation we can solve. So we simplify, move, break, solve. First, can we simplify either side? No. Next, move our absolute value to the left side of the equation. So we're just going to flip this equation. So the absolute value of 100 minus 20t goes to this side, 40 goes to this side. Next, what we can do is we can move everything else. There's nothing else besides the absolute value, so we're good to go. We're going to break. Let's break it into two equations. One equation is going to be 100 minus 20t is equal to 40, and the other equation, what's inside the absolute value stays the same, 100 minus 20t equals, and then the opposite expression, so negative 40. Now we solve each of these separately, simplify, move, solve, so we need to simplify this side. Nope. Next, we move our variable left. Done. Constants need to go to the right, so this 100 has to go. Since it's positive 100, I subtract 100 on both sides. These cancel out, and I get negative 20t is equal to 40 minus 100 gives you negative 60. I then divide both sides by negative 20 to get t by itself, and I get t is equal to 3. Over here, I need to subtract 100 from both sides. These cancel out. Negative 40 minus 100 is the same as negative 40 plus negative 100, so that's negative 140. Now to get t by itself, I divide both sides by negative 20. These cancel out, and I get t is equal to positive 7. So now I have my two possible answers. So now what I'm going to do is check both of those answers. I plug them back in to the original equation. So if I plug in 3 here, 3 times 20 is going to give you 60, and 100 minus 60 is going to give you 40. The absolute value of 40 is 40. That checks out. Over here, if I plug in 7, 7 times 20 gives you 140. What's 100 minus 140? That's going to be negative 40. What's the absolute value of negative 40? That's positive 40. So that checks out as well. Therefore, your friend is 40 feet from you after 3 seconds and after 7 seconds. They both are your answers.